3 begins with book 7. And I think before we start, we need to look at the epigraph of the book. The problems have all been laid out for us. And the way that the book has been written, right, is that we're at our halfway point. We've read 6 of the 12 books, not counting the epilogue. And so we're right here in the middle. And the problem has taken place between books 1 and 6. And the problem laid out is between which way of life you're going to live, right? The choice that is given to you. Are you going to live with Fyodor as your model or your father, or Zosima, right? A smaller version, are you going to live by like Ferapont or Zosima? Are you going to live like Grigory or Fyodor? Are you going to live like Dmitri or Ivan? Are you going to live like a holy fool or a baboon? Are you going to live according to Madonna or Sodom? These are all the different choices that are laid out in books 1 through 6. And these different alternatives, these different ways of being are shown all the way to their completion. We have Zosima dying at the end of book 6. We see his entire life. What does a life look like that lives after the Madonna, that lives a love that is active, right? Versus what does life look like when it is lived like a sensualist and a buffoon? And we will get to see how that life ends in a little while. But we already have some hints of how that kind of life is going to turn out and what it's going to lead to, especially if we look at the Grand Inquisitor. What does that life, how does that life bear fruit? What does it look like? So we have all 3 of our brothers still trying to decide which kind of life they're going to live. And the epigraph of the novel lays out the answer that they should take, but is not given directly. The epigraph comes from John, and this is John 12:24. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall to the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. If we remember what we just read, what we've been looking for is a way of bearing these fruits out and not being alone. And that's going to be important going forward. If we lie to ourselves, we lose the capacity to love. We end up isolated, alienated, alone, ashamed, buffoons, right? The life of Sodom and consumption. On the other side, we have Zosima bearing fruit already. Alyosha has already imitated him, and now we see Alyosha's presence in the life of Alyosha and these other boys. Perhaps will bear fruit going forward. We also have Ivan's way of holding on to things, being by himself, thinking he's going to throw down the cup and end in suicide. We have Dmitri, who's afraid he's going to end up being a murderer. So we have all of these complex problems at the beginning of the story. And then we have the death of Zosima. And part 3, book 7, opens with Zosima's body and the odor of corruption. We saw that Alyosha has been dreaming since the beginning. The dream that was in his heart was that Zosima was going to bring all things into good order, that there was going to be a utopia of sorts in which everything was going to be well. Now that should sound a lot like Ivan's Grand Inquisitor. But this is the dream that he felt. He, if I can find the passage where he believes it, this is his ideal, that all things will go well again. Where is that? The dream that he holds on to. And this is the dream, of course, that must die. This is the, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies. There we go. The conviction, this is page 30. The conviction that the elder after death would bring remarkable glory to the monastery reigned in Alyosha's soul more strongly than in anyone else's in the monastery. And generally of a late, a certain deep flaming inner rapture burned more and more strongly in his heart. He was not at all troubled that the elder stood solitary before him, No matter, he's holy. In his heart there's a secret of renewal for all. And that power will finally establish the truth on earth. And all will be holy and will love one another. And there will be neither rich nor poor, neither exalted nor humiliated, but all will be like children of God. And the true kingdom of Christ will come. That was the dream in Alyosha's heart. So since the introduction of Alyosha, we have seen that what is reigning in Alyosha's heart is a false dream of utopia of the kingdom of God on earth. And Ivan has a similar dream or a plan when he lays out the Grand Inquisitor, that the Grand Inquisitor will correct Christ's work and will create a utopia on earth. Alyosha's is a little bit more meaningful in that it would have Father Zosima and holiness at root and not just a false inquisitor who went into the desert and now knows it's not true. But at the same time, it's really the same fantasy. It's a false god to establish utopia here on earth. And so when Zosima dies, and instead of bringing about a miracle and everyone becomes holy and they all love one another and there's neither rich nor poor nor humiliated or exalted, what actually happens is that there is humiliation, and it's suffered by Zosima because his body begins to stink really quickly. There was a superstition at that time, and the narrator even keeps that superstition at a distance, that would say that the holy people would not be corrupt and that their body would not decay because they were so holy they would be preserved. But what happens is that he's not being preserved. And so Father Farapont thinks this is his moment. This means that Zosima wasn't holy at all. And these things start real problems in Alyosha's. It says a crisis and upheaval in his soul. This is a problem for him. And what does he do when he has this problem? Well, he follows Rakitin. He follows the wrong model. He leaves the monastery and has a twisted smile on his face, much like Ivan did earlier in the text. He raises his eyes strangely. He gets aligned by Father Paisi with those of little faith, and he follows Rakitin to Grushenka's house. And in this moment, we see him doing all the things he's not supposed to do. He drinks champagne, he eats sausage, and he allows Grushenka to sit on his lap. And he repeats Ivan. He says, I do not rebel against my God. I simply do not accept this world. So he's falling for a certain kind of model. He is falling the way of Sodom, of Ivan, of Farapont, and he is having a rebellion. When he goes over to Grushenka's, she's delighted because she has been wanting to seduce him. She has been using Rakitin as her traitor to bring him over. And then what happens is quite suddenly Grushenka realizes the desperateness of this situation. And she says, oh, I shouldn't have done these things that I did, because she didn't realize that his elder had died. And she jumps off his lap. There's a passage here that becomes important. She talks about a little onion, and this moment will play out throughout the text. What is this little onion? So I'm going to go ahead and read this passage. This is the story that Grushenka tells Alyosha, and it begins, once upon a time there was a woman, and she was wicked as could be, and she died, and not one good deed was left behind her. The devils took her and threw her into the lake of fire, and her guardian angel stood thinking, what good deed of hers can I remember to tell God? Then he remembered and said to God, once she pulled up an onion and gave it to a beggar woman. And God answered, now take that onion, hold it out to her in the lake of fire. Let her hold it and pull, and if you pull her out of the lake, she can go to paradise. But if the onion breaks, she has to stay where she is. The angel ran to the woman, held out an onion, and here, woman, he said, take hold of it, I'll pull. And he began pulling carefully, and it almost pulled her all the way out. And when the other sinners in the lake saw her being pulled and began holding on to her, the woman was as wicked could be, and began to kick them with her feet. It's me being pulled out, not you. It's my onion, not yours. And when she said this, the onion broke. The woman fell into the lake and is burning there to the day, and the angel wept and went away. And Grushenka says, I myself am that wicked woman. I boasted to Rakitin that I gave an onion. But I'll say it to you differently now. I've given just one little onion. That's how much good I've done. And don't think I'm good. I'm as wicked as could be. And if you praise me, Alyosha, I'll be ashamed and let me confess everything. So the story of the onion is really interesting because in one sense, just giving one little onion could save you. But only if that one little onion you then let continue to pull you out of the lake of fire. What we see is that the woman does not, but can Grushenka let that little onion pull her out of the lake of fire? And the little onion does pull Alyosha away from the way that he was going. By her getting off his lap and giving him that little onion, it actually starts a new move in his soul, which we'll see come to completion when he returns to the monastery.